Hi there you, I hope you are doing well, and in today's video I decided to go for a little bit more of a simpler topic, and today we will be reading snippets of the stories of a well-known author, Alvin Schwartz. Alvin Schwartz is known for a body of work of more than 2 dozens of books of folklore for young readers that explores everything from wordplay and humor to tales and legends of all kinds. These f***ing birds. So, sit back and relax, or lay back. I don't know what time of the day it is for you right now, but I hope you enjoy these little stories. In this story, a man visits Philadelphia on a business trip and is awoken in the middle of the night by the sound of a car. It turns out to be a hearse filled with people, and the scary-looking driver shouts the titular phrase, "There is room for one more," at the businessman. The hearse eventually leaves, and the man's friends try to convince him it was all a dream. The next day, he goes to enter a crowded elevator in a skyscraper's office building, and someone says the same thing to him. Before the doors shut, he sees that it's the hearse driver and refuses to enter. The doors close, and he hears shrieks as the elevator plummets to the ground and kills everyone inside. Any story that ends with dying screams is bleak as all get out, but this also one buries into your subconscious due to the briefly outlined yet never fully explained mythology. How does the hearse driver know who to invite, and why are they allowed to just say no? The idea of a businessman as the target makes sense, since wealthy, successful people are often portrayed as taking things for granted, or perhaps considering themselves invincible, but there are still more questions than answers. Overall, the whole story feels like the jarring opening scene of a horror movie. Schwartz cites it as a popular story that circulated in both in the US and the UK. A high school senior is driving her car when she starts to be harassed by a driver behind her. It's a man in a red pickup truck, and he keeps flashing his high beams at her. At first, she gives him the benefit of the doubt, but as he continues to flash his lights and tailgate her, she panics and rushes home. There, she abandons her car in the driveway and yells for her dad to call the police. When they arrive, the man in the pickup truck explains that he was trying to warn the girl and save her from an intruder in the back seat who was wielding a knife. This scenario is beyond unlikely, but it's a deft, cynical examination of the ways in which young women are conditioned to be cautious, yet still face very real threats despite any of all precaution. Some of the ghosties in Schwartz stories lose their ability to scare readers over time, but real-life threats never lose their luster, especially when considering the young age at which series fans first absorb them. Such things happen involves a pair of neighbors, one whom comes to believe that the other is a witch who is cursing him. The story is frightening for a number of reasons, among them the imaginary and rituals as its center. Bill's perfectly healthy dog dies after he accidentally runs over old Addie's cat, for one. For another, Bill's grandpa tells him to slowly hammer a nail into a particular type of tree with Addie's outline drawn on it, over an X drawn on her heart in order to drive out the powers. Eventually, another neighbor comes saying Addie has fallen ill and desperately needs to borrow something, But Bill is sure that this is part of the ritual too and refuses to lend anything. In the end, we find out Addie is just a sick old woman who needed help, and Bill lets her die in front of him. Oops. Plenty of horror classics make use of ambiguous fear of the supernatural, teasing audiences before finally revealing that the baddie was human all along. As a young reader, the ethical implications of the twist that the main character has blood on his hands would be hard to handle, though it's also a good litmus test for young horror fans who finish reading and still want more. A babysitter is plagued by disturbing phone calls that she dismisses as a prank. Eventually, the calls escalate and become threatening. This is the rare case in which Swartz's version is tamer than others, with the caller simply counting down to some unknown event with cryptic phrases like 1 hour and pretty soon now. The freaked out babysitter ultimately calls the police, who trace the call to the house's other line. The man bolts down from upstairs and is eventually apprehended by the police. Even though this version of the babysitter is mild by scary story standards, no death, haunting, or discretion of bodies, it's still fundamentally unsettling. Most of these chain letter type urban legends involve vulnerable young women, and this one in particular has the added fear factor of the responsible for innocent lives. Although we've all heard them 1,000 times before, stories like The Babysitter continues to instill new generations with a particular fear of something simple as staying home alone. Many of Swartz's stories have surprisingly adult setups, and Just Delicious is one of the darkest. In it, a woman is afraid of her bully husband and always makes sure to have food on the table when he comes home from work. One day, she buys him a choice cut of liver, but it looks too mouth-watering to pass up, and she eats it. Desperate to replace the liver before he gets home, she steals a human liver from an open casket funeral taking place next door and cooks it for her husband. The husband scarfs it up, unaware of his own cannibalism, and when a hound calls out to them in the night, demanding to know who ate her liver, the wife quickly points the finger at her British spouse. In a weird way, this is kind of a happy ending, but there is some nuance here that makes the story more satisfying and disturbing to an adult reader. There's a strange sense of incidentalism here, with one bizarre event after another leading to the husband's likely demise. The story ends with him screaming in the dark. More than that, though, there are clear implications of spousal abuse, making this one of Swartz's darkest and most baffling children's book retellings. That's more, the book's notes mention that some variations of the folktale end with the man cutting out his wife's liver as a replacement to appease the spirit. Yikes. From a storytelling standpoint, the drum makes very little sense, but it's exactly the type of weirdo nonsense cautionary tale that populates a child's nightmares. In it, two girls live in a country home, and while playing outside, they meet a mysterious traveler. She's another girl, and she's banging a drum featuring mechanical people on it, and that the sisters envy. She tells them she'll give them the drum if they are really bad and report back to her about it next day. The girls throw tantrums and vex their mother, but the next day the girl says it isn't enough and that they have to be worse. Their badness escalates until their mother starts threatening to leave with their baby brother, saying they'll instead have a new mother with glass eyes and a mechanical tail in her place. Long story short, this repeats for a few days until the nomad girl reveals that it was all a cruel joke on her part and that she never planned on giving them a drum. The girls go home, but when they get there, their mother and brother are gone. You can guess what's in their place. Two friends are out for a walk when they spot a man-like thing in the distance that then crawls through a field and stands up. The thing seems to blip out of their vision twice, but finally reappears and walks towards them. By this point, the guys are scared, but they decide to rationalize their fear and take a good look at the thing. It's gaunt and skeletal, wearing man's clothing, and it follows them home. That's all there is until a year later, when one of the men is struck by a terminal illness. His friend is by his bedside as he dies and swears he looks just like the thing they saw. Less than a page long, The Bride is a horror story that packs a punch with few words. In it, a young bride plays hide and seek on her wedding day. Weird reception game choice, but okay. She hides in an old chest upstairs, but as she's getting in, the lid falls on her and knocks her unconscious. The wedding party looks for her for days, but the old trunk is ignored until years later an unsuspecting maid finds the bride's skeletal body, curled in the trunk, still in her white wedding dress. There is something deeply chilling in the idea of thinking someone may have left willingly, only to discover much later that they were very close by, waiting for rescue and never getting it. Harold. The name is by far the most repeated answer one gets when asking Scary Stories readers which tale is most firmly lodged in their psyche. The brutality and darkness of the story are matched only by its unique freakness, a specificity that sears in the mind upon one's first reading. In Harold, two cowherds create a scarecrow that is supposedly looks like a farmer they hate, which they put outside during the daytime and bring into their hut at night. The reason for their hatred isn't mentioned, but we know that once the scarecrow counterpart is made, they laugh at him, speak to him, curse him, and beat him, even smear food on him. One day, the scarecrow makes a sound that the man assumed must have been a mouse living in the straw stuffing. They consider throwing him in the fire, but decide instead to leave him behind when they move their herd. One night, before they're set to leave, they notice that Harold has grown larger, and the next day, he gets up and begins pacing. The men are understandably shaken and decided to leave with their cows right then. Harold has vanished by the time they leave, so when they realize they've forgotten their milking stool, they draw straws, and one man returns to get it. When he doesn't come back, the other goes looking for him, only to see Harold on the roof of their hut. As Alfred watched, Swart's story ends. Harold kneeled and stretched out a bloody skin to dry in the sun. There's a lot to unpack here, all of it horrifying. There are the man's nonchalant acts of seemingly reasonless violence, which they seem to use as a bonding experience and ritual. This story has all the elements of a classic urban legend. Teenagers, paper-thin social commentary, and disquieting twist. Here's how it goes. A poor girl is invited to a formal dance, but she can't afford a dress. She rents a beautiful gown and is the belle of the ball, but eventually gets dizzy from way too much dancing, she thinks, and asks her date to take her home. The next morning, her mother finds her dead. It turns out the dress she rented was stolen from a corpse before burial, but she was poisoned with embalming fluid that activated when she sweated, slowly stopping her blood flow. The moral here is unclear. Don't go to dances, don't shop secondhand. Funeral homes can be pretty messed up, but the story is all the more upsetting because the girl was having her Cinderella moment and, like another famous prom horror story, Carrie, it was cut violently short. Here is all I've got for today's scary story reading. I hope you enjoyed. If you made to this point of the video, if you did, then let me know which story you found as scariest. I will see you in my next video.